Welcome to the Personal Development Mastery Podcast. I am 𝘁𝗁𝗄𝗆 and my mission is to inspire you to grow, stand out, and take action towards the next level of your life. I interview leaders, authors, successful entrepreneurs, spiritual teachers, exceptional people who will inspire you to improve your life. Tune in for 2 episodes each week and make sure you subscribe to get them as soon as they are released. In today's show, I am delighted to speak with Shireen Jaffer. Shireen, you are the CEO and co-founder of Edvo, where you're building technology to help people think well and make better sense of the world. Prior to that, you founded and bootstrapped your first company, Skillify, to 7 figures and helped over 150,000 students learn better through internships and mentors. You have been recognized on the Forbes 30 under 30 list, and you are an active community builder, angel investor, and advisor for early stage startups. You are passionate about helping people think better and build lives on their own terms. Shireen, welcome to Personal Development Mastery. It's a real joy to speak with you today.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here.
I'd love to start with asking you to give us some elements of your story or your journey. And what I would ask specifically as a self-made entrepreneur, tell me, where do you begin? How did your initial step, what triggered you to go to that path?
Yeah, so very loaded question. There's so many things that triggered a lot of the different journeys that I've been on. I think the biggest one, and I often get asked, why did you choose to be an entrepreneur? And I always say, I don't think being an entrepreneur specifically was my choice, because I didn't know what an entrepreneur was. I had never even heard of that word, which sounds crazy, by the way, once you find out where I grew up. But point being, I did not set out to be an entrepreneur. I set out to solve pains that I just did not want to feel anymore. My first company that I started when I was 18, it did not start as a company. It started as a summer project I did to help my friends learn how to get internships. Mm-hmm. And the pain I felt is that when I was looking for work and when I was looking for internships that I actually wanted, they weren't things that I was just doing for the sake of putting something on my resume. It was really hard to find those opportunities as a 16, 17, 18-year-old because everyone said I was too young. My friends' parents would say, why are you letting yourself get distracted by work? Just focus on your schooling and your studies. And so no one was willing to teach me skills that I needed to go find myself, to go explore, to go figure out what makes me feel excited. So I taught myself those skills all throughout high school. And then I saw my friends struggling with those exact pains. And I said, okay, well, I fixed it for myself. Let me fix it for other people. And then that summer project turned into a business I bootstrapped to 7 figures over 4 years. So that is really what triggered many of the different entrepreneurial journeys, as you'll say, throughout my life.
Mm-hmm. You said skills. You used the word learning skills that you weren't be taught in school or in the traditional education system. And the word self-education came to mind, which in my mind, tell me what you think, in my mind, self-education and personal development are pretty much the same thing. One can't happen without the other. The more you educate yourself on the things that matter to you, the more your personal development journey grows and vice versa.
Absolutely. I'm a huge advocate for self-directed learning, self-education. And the reason for that, and this was a recent aha moment. When I say recent, I say, I think about 18 months ago. So pretty recent, relatively. This aha moment I had when I was really asking myself the question, what does it mean to be educated in our society? What ways do I want to develop myself in order to really feel that I'm educated? And when I asked myself that question, the voice that was constantly in my head was that, well, how do you know what to educate yourself on when the world is moving so fast? The world is changing constantly. The skills you might need to know, they change year over year, decade over decade. So the best thing you can do for yourself, and for me personally, the best thing I could do for myself was learn how to learn and learn how to self-educate, because that gives me the confidence that no matter how the world shifts, I will be able to pinpoint, here is the batch of skills that I need to develop myself into to build this type of life that I want based on where the world is going, and then educate myself in those skills. So I'm a huge, huge advocate for self-directed learning. And I would say it's arguably the most important skill you can develop for your life.
I agree 100%. And you said, and I wrote that down because it's an excellent question. What does it mean to be educated? Because nowadays it's very different than it was, let's say 20 or 30 years ago, let alone if we go back to, the previous generation. The education there was much more simple in its definition. I mean, if you had gone to the university, it would be safe to assume that unless you cheated, that you were educated. Nowadays, this is completely, maybe even irrelevant. I would say it's obsolete in many ways, and understanding what it is that you said, learn how to learn, it is something that I don't think it's been taught anymore, not in traditional education settings anyway. It's something that you have to figure it out yourself, and many people take a very long time before they discover this.
And I'll call something out, because since this is all about personal development, being educated, that the definition of education is personal, in my opinion. What does it mean to you to be educated? Because no one can tell you what life you want to live. And so you have to understand, what is the life I want to live? How do I want to feel every day? What do I want to contribute to? What are things that I care about? And then what is the education needed for that? So even when you mention, back in the day, it was a lot simpler because you could go to education and, be considered educated. Yeah. That's the key word, right? Be considered. Sure, externally, you can show off your degrees and fit a societal definition of educated. And I would argue that really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter for your personal journey. It certainly matters for certain survival needs, no doubt. And there's always a conflict with that. But it really doesn't matter for your personal journey, because I'm sure and everyone in the audience knows so many people in our lives. And frankly, we could be those people in our lives that have so much societal education. We've worked at those big companies, or we have those degrees, or we've done those certain boot camps, or whatever it may be. Yet somehow we are struggling to build the life we want. We're struggling to find financial independence. We're struggling with our health. We're struggling with our mental well-being because we've neglected to educate ourselves on the things that actually matter to us. And that, I think, is an opportunity. That truly is an opportunity for us to lean into.
I like very much how you said we neglected that, because it's really our responsibility, and the education system, and I'm sharing only my own personal opinion now, it has failed. It's not adequate for the times that we live in it. So going to school or to university, in most cases anyway, I don't want to say for everything, but it's a waste of time. You end up with a tremendous debt that you have to pay off the rest of your life, and you don't learn. And that's what you were saying. That's what I got, that you don't learn really what's important to live a fulfilled life, to get the skills to be able to manage your emotional state and be able to focus on what you're doing rather than being distracted every 5 seconds by something. And all these things are, in the end, our responsibility to find out and educate ourselves and learn and improve. So it's great that I completely understand that, and I like how you said very much that it is up to us. We have neglected it, so it's up to us to fix it, to realize that. And I wanted to ask you, brings me nicely to a concept that we talk about a lot. It's called the lifelong learning. That it doesn't stop. When you finish your, I don't know, maybe your university or school, it doesn't end there. So tell me what you think about this concept of lifelong learning, and is it something that people talk more about rather than do it, or?
Yeah, that's a great question. I found lifelong learning to be this buzzword that if you say it enough, it feels like you're doing it. And step one is to become aware of what is lifelong learning and why it matters to you. Because once you can figure out, humans have an incentive. If the incentive is strong enough to take something seriously, they will. And so creating and really internalizing what lifelong learning unlocks for you, the immense opportunity that it unlocks for you, making time to just understand that will allow more people to really embrace lifelong learning. So for me, I think about I learn a lot from nature. I learn a lot from just, observing Mother Nature and the environment around us and seeing, why certain things were designed certain ways. How do ecosystems flourish? How do ecosystems get destroyed, right? What are those things? And I think about humans, just us as kids. And the most human thing, one of the most human things, is to learn. Babies, my nephew was recently born. He is almost 18 months old. And this has been top of mind for me as I've been observing him. Babies learn so fast. They learn so fast. We all know this. If we don't have exposure to kids or toddlers around us, we certainly hear about it. They learn so fast, and we learn so fast. We learned so fast as we were kids. So we were built to learn. Our bodies are constantly learning. Our cells are constantly recreating themselves. And so we are meant to learn. And somewhere along the way, we start being taught that it's worth more to pay attention to someone else, that we need to be dependent on someone else, like a teacher or a parent, to teach us. Than to listen to ourselves, and then to listen to our own curiosities and to own our own, questions, to really just be able to answer our own questions. And, I think about my high school experience. So I grew up in the Silicon Valley. And so let's go back to the first thing I said. I did not know what it meant to be an entrepreneur. I had not even heard that word. Growing up in the Silicon Valley, the center of entrepreneurship and innovation. How crazy is that? How did I never know about entrepreneurship growing up in one of the best high school districts in the nation? And the reason for that is the focus was so much on the traditional definition of education, getting into college, doing the things that get you into college, that feeding our own curiosity, even looking outside of the walls of our high school and understanding what's happening on Page Mill Road, what's happening at Stanford and the entrepreneurship programs at Stanford, what's even happening in those areas. Very few people, very few students got to see that, and it was usually because of the exposure they had from their parents. But I, coming from Pakistan as an immigrant, the daughter of a middle income class at best single mom, I did not have that exposure. And so I was funneled with the majority of students that were just told, keep your head down, get good grades, don't ask too many questions, get into a college, and then you can live your life. And that's insane. So lifelong learning to me is something that is often said, but very misunderstood. And so it is up to us to really internalize it and understand the impact of that. as our most human skill set and what that can do for you. And I promise you will want to embrace it as a result once you understand its power.
Hi, it's Aggie here, interrupting you with something you may find useful. One of the most frustrating feelings is when you're trying to focus, but you can't get your brain to concentrate on the important work in front of you. This happens to me all the time, and if it happens to you too, you are not alone. 40% of people say they have to make a big effort to concentrate. But if you're having trouble getting focused, I have a solution for you. I'm so excited to be partnering with Brain FM. Brain FM is a great app, and I use it to block out my mental chatter and zone in on my number one priority of the day. Brain FM uses functional music that is backed by science and research, and it is designed to give us that extra edge when we need our undivided attention. And they also have relaxation, meditation, and deep sleep modules that help you unwind and recharge. So if you want to be able to place your full attention exclusively in the activity you choose, whether that's meaningful work or relaxing or getting high quality sleep, right now as my podcast listener, you get 20% off Brain FM subscription at brain.fm/Aggie. That's an amazing deal for such a useful app. Thousands of people have given 5-star reviews to Brain FM. Find out why? brain.fm/Aggie. Thank you. And let me ask you, let's talk about learning, actually learning better, and because it's very important. So if you were to speak to the listener that is very intrigued now and he says, or she says that I would like to re-explore or redefine what's happening with my learning, what are some, you think, key elements, key factors that we haven't learned about learning and we need, sorry, I found the right word, we need to learn in order to learn better?
Great. So step one is to accept that you are learning all the time. Whether you recognize it or not, you are learning all the time. You are forming opinions all the time. You are exposing yourself to beliefs that you will find yourself just believing all the time. This happens all the time. So step one, accept that you're learning all the time. Step two is then asking yourself, well, how are you learning? How do you learn right now in this moment? And the reality is the answer for most people will be that they learn passively, that they learn by consuming a lot of content online. They consume a lot of news. They consume a lot of opinions on social media like Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, whatever it may be. They listen to a lot of podcasts and they just listen while they're driving or they listen while they're cooking. And so there's a lot of passive learning going on. And the problem with passive learning is that it doesn't allow opportunity to really think about what you are learning. Your body or your mind or whatever will just start soaking in a lot of these ideas and a lot of these thoughts. And before you know it, they will influence your own decisions and you never made a conscious decision to have learned those things. That's the crazy part about passive learning. And the majority of us learn passively. So step two is doing that self-reflection around, well, how do I learn today? Where do I learn from? And when you become aware of it, you'll start noticing day to day, just hour to hour, you'll be like, oh my gosh, I just read this article and then moved on to this other article and then moved on to my Slack notifications. And I didn't even think about whether this article was true or who the author was or who this media source is. I didn't even take a minute to look into where is my information coming from, right? So that is all passive learning and we all do it. Why? Because our media environments are actually, let me take a step back, our information environments, where we get our information about what's happening in the world, about what might be important to us. Those environments are one-way streets. They broadcast to you. There is no opportunity to have a discourse. There is no opportunity to ask questions. They just broadcast to you, right? And we consume this information usually online in our browsers, in our Chromes, our Safaris, just our browser. And our browser was built to simply fetch that information and display it to you. Again, broadcast, right? That's all it does. So then it doesn't create space for you to actually actively learn. And that's step 3, is really understanding, how can I go from passive learning to active learning? Learning that empowers me to have a choice, of, do I believe in this or not? Do I want to learn this or not? Do I want to learn this in this way? Do I agree with this way of doing things? Do I agree with this way of thinking things? Do I agree with this perspective on the world? That is active. Those are things that are empowered by active thinking. And so then step 4 is creating environments for yourself that enable more active thinking than passive thinking, more active learning than passive learning. And that's what I've been obsessed with for myself. A lot of the work I do, as I mentioned, is a result of the pains I felt. And so when I started becoming more aware of how poorly I had been learning my entire life, and then made the choice of, I want to be an active learner and I want to be more aware of what I think and why, I started realizing, oh my gosh, there is no technology or tooling to help me do this. And I found myself with endless amounts of notebooks, just note-taking all the time, and spending more of my time feeling anxious and scattered than actually in the flow of real learning. And that's when I started building tooling for myself that I like to call my personal learning management system, things that help me not just learn actively, but then also connect my learnings to each other and really unlock my own power to be a super learner and learn anything I want. So those, to recap, so step 1, really accept that you're learning all the time. Step 2, identify and reflect on how you learn today. You might recognize that passive learning is your default. Step 3, understand what active learning can be. And then step 4, create environments that empower you to be an active learner more than a passive learner.
I want you to tell me more about this environment that you create, because I think it's a natural next question. So going from passive learning to active learning, you say creating the environments. What do you mean by environments?
Yeah, so I found for myself, I was learning online all the time. I'm, spending 8 hours pretty much on my computer during my workday, and I'm learning online. And so I asked myself, well, where am I spending my time online? It was in the browser. I read a lot of articles. I read a lot of white papers. I read Twitter threads. People are always slacking me. My colleagues are always slacking me. Oh, this is an interesting read, or what do you think about this? Or I get these as text messages. So all of that was happening in my browser. So my first step was, oh my gosh, how do I even actively interact with this content and leave notes on it and leave thoughts on it without having to reach for a pen and paper? That just seems archaic. As much as I love pen and paper, it's just so inconvenient to have to go fumble for it and try to write down your thoughts, and your thoughts are in a completely different area than the information that you're criticizing, right? Or critiquing or reflecting on. So step 1 for me was, okay, how do I build just basic tooling that allows me to do simple things like, if I'm reading an article, can I highlight something and then leave a note that appears right next to that highlight? Can I ask a question? Can I write down all the questions that come up naturally as I'm reading or watching a video? Can I quickly reference something that I know I've read before or consumed before to this thing that I am now consuming, right? Can I make those connections between my knowledge? And so I started looking for tools. I said, okay, who's doing that? And I came across a lot of different extensions, Chrome extensions that allow you to, highlight things and then take notes on them. But they never worked on every single web page across the web. If you think about the millions of pages that exist, the content that's out there, every 2 years, we produce more information on the web than what existed prior. That's crazy.
It's crazy.
That's crazy. Every 2 years, guys, it's insane. And so we have all this information available to us. Not all of it is honestly great. So we need to teach ourselves the ability to tell good from bad, right from wrong, whatever. It's all subjective, but whatever makes sense to us. And so you have to have these tools be usable across the web. And so that's where it gets tough. And so I said, okay, can I build a tool that actually does that? It allows me to convert any web page into an active learning environment. So, that's one of the tools we built. That's, what we do now. That's what I do professionally is I have a team. I have a brilliant engineering team, and we build these tools all day long. Another type of tool I think a lot about is, the biggest distraction to learning, to active learning, and just being able to think without feeling anxiety. The biggest distraction to that is all the context switching we do every day, right? All the scatters we do. So if you think about, if you're trying to learn, let's say about cryptocurrency, right? Very hot topic. If you're trying to learn about cryptocurrency, information around that might live across 4 or 5 different places. Forget the web for a minute, right? Just all the different places it lives in the web, but just in your own, you might have taken notes in your Apple Notes. You might have had a conversation with a friend, and that conversation on cryptocurrency is stuck in your iMessages. Or you might have had a conversation in your Discord community in one of the Discord servers for, that you belong to. You might have emails with newsletters on cryptocurrency. You might have your podcast, right? And so all these things live in all these different places. And so most of the time, you're just trying to switch between these apps. You're just trying to find, where was that thing again? And so in the limited time that you believe you have with your busy life, you're spending most of it just trying to stay organized. And that is a detriment to real learning. And so tool number 2 that, we built, and these all work together, of course, but another subset of the tooling that we built is, how do you create spaces for the different things you're learning about, whether it's topics like cryptocurrency, whether it's, just being able to organize your thoughts on a feedback you need to give a colleague, right? So if I'm giving my colleague feedback on a website design they did, I need to be able to see the designs. I need to be able to see my notes. I need to be able to see previous versions of the designs all in one place for real thinking to happen. And so in our technology that we call Edvo allows you to create spaces for the things that you are learning about, and then bring in all the applications where information exists within one space. So you have your Discord and your notes and your articles and your podcasts and your YouTube videos all in the same space. And it's your personal learning space to just make sense of that specific topic and stay in the flow. So I think about what that enables someone to do for their learning and also for their efficiency. And so those are the types of tools that I have been building for the last 18 months and that we're now just bringing to the world.
That's very interesting, and I can certainly relate to that. The word overwhelm comes to mind sometimes with what's going on with the input, the influx of information we have from so many different sources. And eventually, as you said, it's you spend time trying to find out in which was it on an email that I read that, or was it on LinkedIn, and then in the end you just rely on the limited ability of your mind to record these things, and you're going to miss them. So it's fascinating actually as a concept to be able to collate them and have one space, as you said, for each of the topic that you're learning. It certainly helps the concentration, the focus, and minimizing the irrelevant stuff. So that's sounds brilliant.
Aggie, have you heard of the first brain, second brain concept?
No, tell me.
Okay, because that's what you're talking about. And I think it's really valuable to the listeners as well, because I think it's fascinating. So the first brain, second brain conversations that have been happening, they're happening in the personal knowledge management space, PKM space. If you have used things like Notion, Rome Research, Obsidian, they all market themselves as personal knowledge management systems. And the conversations that have been happening is exactly, Aggie, what you said, is when your first brain is limited in its ability to recall and its ability to make connections with other, information you might have in your brain from years ago, things that can actually help you make better decisions, faster decisions. When your first brain struggles with that, can we build a second brain with the use of technology that complements your first brain to surface that type of information and help you then learn faster and make better decisions? However, what I've noticed that's happening is we've been confusing the value of the second brain. So I'm seeing a lot of the tools and technologies that are coming out really thinking that, what we care about is storage. What we care about is, we can't store enough stuff in our first brain. So let's have a second brain, a personal knowledge management system where we can hoard information, where we can note take on everything, and where we can, yes, connect things to each other, but it's really more of like put everything in this thing. And the reality is, I don't really care how my first brain stores things. I don't really care where it stored things. I mean, exactly. I'm excited to learn about it, but I don't really care. All I care about is my clock speed fast? Can I process quickly? Can I recall information quickly? Can I remember the things I want to remember? And then can I remember them accurately? And we all know our memory is not very accurate. So the power of the second brain is in the processing. Yes, storage is a result, but the processing of when does it surface information to you? And does that information lead to a better outcome for you? Does it lead to a better decision for you? Does it lead to better thinking for you? And so if we can really build a second brain, which is what we're going after, that can help your first brain think better, while also complementing it with better processing, we've just unlocked a lot of efficiency for people. We've saved a lot of pain for people. We've allowed people to really take learning into their own hands for the first time, honestly, for most people. So that's the first brain, second brain conversation that's happening. It's typically happening on Twitter and in folks in the space. But I think it's just fascinating to think about it that way.
It certainly does. And yes, I hadn't. I find it fascinating as well the way you describe it, and I want to. You mentioned earlier on the word, and I wanted to come back to that and ask you the word super learners, and I also find that word very intriguing. And I want to ask you: is that something? Who do you think can access that? Can tap into that? Do you think it is universal? Do you think intelligent people have more of it, or is it something? What are your thoughts?
I think it's universal, and I think it's universal because all of us are born with it. We are born to adapt. Humans have to adapt. We look at evolution. I mean, it's not obviously limited to humans, but learning is just so fundamental to our survival. And because of that, it feels like it's universal. And so in order to become a super learner, does everyone have the potential to unlock that within themselves? Absolutely. And I very intentionally say unlock within yourself because it is there. I don't say, and I just talked to my team about this, we don't say become a super learner. We used to say that, by the way. But it's not about becoming anything. It's about unlocking what's already there. And as a result, being more of yourself. And so do I believe everyone can do that? Yes. Do I believe that everyone has the privilege to do that? No, because this takes so much time and so much self-awareness. And frankly, time, most people don't think they have time. And a lot of people are currently trapped in situations at no fault of their own that don't give them the privilege to even think about these things because they have to survive. And that is a very sad reality of the world we live in and of the society that we've built, where if humankind chose today to solve poverty and solve all these sad problems that exist, we could solve it. We have more than enough resources to do that. However, we don't, for many reasons, many complex reasons. So that's my answer from a place of empathy from, as someone, again, who was born in Pakistan, who has had friends and loved ones in really awful situations. I know that all of us can be a super learner. However, not all of us have the privilege. And the one thing I care about is helping people unlock that privilege, helping people get to a point where, it honestly doesn't take that much time in the grand scheme of things, but the amount of programming that we need to fight, the amount of programming that we need to overcome to then get ourselves to believe that we can be super learners and then become super learners, that takes most of the time. So that's my answer to your question.
That's awesome. And Shireen, so you said about being an active learner and this process or processing all the information. And I always on the podcast want to, from this processing, I want to even go to the next step, which is actually taking the action based on your knowledge. In other words, application of that filtered knowledge. So I always want to offer to the listener something actionable as a result of the conversation that we had. So I want to ask you, based on what we said, if you were to give to the listener something actionable they can implement tonight or tomorrow morning, maybe that will allow them to take a step towards unlocking that potential they have of being a super learner, what would you tell him or her?
It goes back to the 4 steps that I detailed earlier. You have to start with becoming aware of what learning means to you before you can take action. Mm-hmm. We fall in the trap of doing without thinking about why we're doing things, right? So I will never say, here, do this one thing, it's going to change your life, because it's not unless you're doing it with the right intention. So the first thing you can do tonight is just ask yourself, what does learning mean to me? Do I value learning? And how do I know the answer to that, right? Because if you say, yes, I do value learning, well, how do you know? Of course, you're listening to this podcast, so there's clearly a desire
good indication.
Here.
Yes.
It's a good indication. But how is are you listening to this podcast while you're cooking? Are you listening to this podcast while you're driving? This isn't coming from a place of judgment. It's simply coming from a place of becoming aware of how you do things and how much value do you really give to learning and really understanding what that means to you. Mm-hmm. So do that first. And I would say the second thing, which is going to take you more than a night to do, in most cases, is build that environment for yourself that allows real active learning to happen. And it takes a lot of time because, of course, now you have to find the tools and the configuration of tools. And if all that fails, and frankly, don't even start there, start with Edvo. Come to Edvo, edvo.com, and we built that tooling. And because we're so early, by the way, it's absolutely free because we are looking for early adopters to come use this environment that we've created, honestly, for ourselves and see if it works for many different types of people. Does it work for you based on the type of job you have, the lifestyle you have, the learner you are, the type of thinking you do, your starting point? If it can work for you and you and you and you and many, many people, then we've unlocked something really powerful. So come if you want to be an early adopter and be okay with, the bugs that come with early technology. Start at Edvo, but otherwise, at least make the time to understand what is it that you need to really embrace learning as your daily habit. And by the way, let's not just learning as a daily habit, active learning as a daily habit, because you're learning every day anyways, and build the environment that enables that.
Thank you. That's great. And I will just reiterate in my own words what you said, that to answer the question, what does learning mean to me and whether I value learning, and even more importantly, how do I know that I do? So that's, I think it's a great exercise, if you wish, to take some time and reflect on it, because it will lead to some very interesting observations.
And I will say one other thing on this the word learning. I can't tell you, and I still struggle with this, by the way. I can't tell you how many people I've told or I've discussed learning with, and I've told that I'm building tools for learn. And they always say, oh, what age kids are you working with? What age kids are you building these tools for? Because when we hear the word learning, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if the audience resonates with, or Aggie, you resonate with this, but something resisting comes up to me where I'm just like, oh, this is more than learning. Like, learning is for kids. And I always feel that resistance, even now, even when I'm so obsessed with learning. I think part of me being so obsessed with learning is to teach myself that learning is lifelong and it's for all ages. And it's not a term that only applies to schooling and kids. And it's something we have to take seriously for ourselves. And so I also want to put that out there is, if you're feeling that resistance to taking learning seriously, it's okay. I don't blame you. I feel it. And I think you just have to ask yourself the question, what does it mean for me to build the life I want? What does it require for me to adapt to this world that changes overnight? 2020 showed us that so clearly. And what is the most important skill I need? And I will say learning is that skill. And empathy is very, very important. And we don't need to talk about that. But empathy is also learned in many ways. So learning is absolutely that skill.
It's one of my favorite quotes by Albert Einstein. He said that the moment you stop learning, you start dying. So for me, personally, I don't feel that resistance that you do, but I'm sure that many people do. I'm sure that they do. Shireen, I would also like to ask you a couple of quick fire questions just to wrap things up today. And my first one is, what does personal development mean to you?
Being my best self, experiencing better versions of myself.
And let's say you could go back in time and meet your 16-year-old self. What's one piece of advice you would give her?
Bet on yourself. Do everything you do from a place of love and from a place of just betting on yourself and believing in yourself. And do not, if you ever feel fear or anxiety, or you're taking an action because in that moment you're experiencing those fearful emotions, those survival instincts, I shouldn't say survival instinct, that anxiety, take a minute and step back and just ask yourself, how can I do this from a place of love? How can I do this from a place of self-belief? That's the most important advice I would give my 16-year-old self.
Thank you. That's beautiful. And one more hypothetical question then. Let's say you could wave a magic wand and change something in the world as it is today. What would you change?
I would bring life to an education system that actually educates people, that actually allows people, it's not even educates people, but that actually allows people to feel like they have the education they need to build the life they want. And it's not about bringing down the current education system. I just don't think an education system even exists. So we have to create one. And so with the magic wand, that is what I would create.
I would love to see that new educational system. There are so many things, and it's digressing completely from what we talked about, but there's so many things that are changing in humanity, I would say, and we're recording this end of 2021, so there are so many things that are happening, and I'm hoping that a new education system, along with other new systems, will replace the current failing structures that we have in society in general, and that's completely off topic. I just wanted to get it off my chest, if you want. Shireen, what's the best place for someone to connect with you and find out more?
I am active on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter. Just Shireen. If you just look up Shireen Jaffer Edvo on Google or Twitter or any social media, I should be the first one that pops up. So Twitter is the best place to reach out to me. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And you can, of course, reach out to us on edvo.com, edvo.com.
Thank you. I really enjoyed our conversation today, and I feel that this topic of learning, it's one of the most important topics, because it is something that we do anyway, as you were saying earlier, but we don't do it in the right way, and certainly not in a focused way that can lead us to the results. So I want to wish you all the best with your project, which sounds, I've just learned about it now, but it sounds very intriguing, and I would certainly check it out more in detail myself and give some feedback to you. And all the very best. Any last parting words from you?
One, thank you so much for those kind words and for this conversation. Of course, I can talk about learning all day long. Last words to the audience. You have more power within you than you realize. And I would just ask myself, if I were you, and I do ask myself this all the time, anything that you believe right now about yourself, about your abilities, about the type of life you think you can have, just ask yourself where those beliefs come from. And I think you'll find that those beliefs were never yours, which again creates a beautiful opportunity for you to self-create beliefs and for you to really build the life you want and develop the skills you want. And I really, really wish that for all of you. So thank you again, Aggie, for having me here.
I hope you enjoyed listening. If you have, please share this episode with someone who you think will benefit from it. If you want to know more about what I do, visit my website 𝗁𝗁𝗵𝗀𝗆𝗆.com. And until next time, stand out, don't fit in,